Hold on, friends. I'm getting used to this thing a little bit by little. I ran out and got my hands on an earbud with the little microphone doohickey on there. Hopefully that will help a little bit. Once again, I'm at work. Got to kill a little bit of time. Sitting out in front of a very posh restaurant called a Pasto. The crew doesn't show up till noon, and then after that, I'm off until Monday. It's going to be a nice weekend, depending on how you look at it. Anyhow, this will be like my third attempt at making this video. I want to talk about encumbrance and how I like to handle it. It's been my experience over the decades that among many of the casual rules that get easily cast aside by both GMs and players in a lot of games, but definitely in Dungeons and Dragons, is encumbrance. It's a bunch of math formulas that nobody really gives a damn about or doesn't want to have to worry about, because when you have a dragon's treasure trove, you want to just pack it all into your back pocket and schlep it back to town, right? Because that's kind of how they're supposed to go. Of course, if you go back way back, this hasn't always been the case. One of the earliest systems was just having X amount of slots. That's what we'll call them, slots. X amount of lines on your character sheet, and they would represent locations. So you can carry so much stuff. And what they meant by that was, aside from what, you can only wear one suit of armor. You can only wear one hat, be it a hat or a helmet. You can make all the nuanced arguments you want, but unless you have two heads, that's usually how that works. So if we forego items worn, and we only carry about, what we're carrying about is items carried or transported. I figured that 20 slots for a medium-sized human character is reasonable. And when we talk about what constitutes an item, I figured that anything that requires a use or can be held in one hand is a item. So it would fill a slot. And i.e., if you had a single torch and you stuck it in your belt, for example, it's taking up some space. If you had 6 torches and you stuck them in your back, you're going to have a whole lot of them, a literal brandelier of them. So they're taking up a lot of space. Even if you have them together in a bundle, that bundle's this long on average, 1.5 to 2 feet long, probably easily a half a foot or a foot thick. At that point, it's a bit awkward to hold in one hand. You're not going to utilize it that way, so it would be more than one slot. So I figured that things that are smaller, so if we're talking coins, for example, flint, arrowheads, these are bulky items, and they carry a lot more weight than either bulk or weight than what you think. So a bag of pennies is pretty heavy. A bag of quarters is heavier. So if you have 25 50-cent pieces, which would be about average for most coins in our settings, then having 25 of them occupy a slot is reasonable. So I figure that if you had a pouch, your pouches could range between 1 and 3 slots for encumbrance. And then a backpack could carry between 10 and 15. So if you had a satchel, perhaps it holds 5. It's how you look at it. But all total between the pouches and the packs and whatever else you're carrying, to avoid any penalties for encumbrance, then 20 should be the maximum. So it's the same similar sense. If I'm picking up weapons and I want to save them because they have value, a single sword or dagger, it takes up a hand slot, so a slot. If you're talking a two-handed weapon, now you're talking 2 slots. So ideally, if you had 7 swords, that's 7 slots on your body. What are you going to leave behind to carry that stuff? If you're carrying, 7 two-handed swords, now you're talking 14. You kind of get where I'm going with that. It just makes things a lot simpler, and you can think on the fly. And when you talk about full immersion, a lot of people tend to get even further away from the mechanical rules of things like encumbrance, because we don't care about that. We're talking about the story. We want to interact with it. We want to experience. Part of the experience is knowing that you can only carry so much junk with you. Hello? It's real world experience too. Physically speaking, I know how much I can carry, and I know when I'm struggling, and I know when I'm really pushing myself. So in the case of my argument of slots, I would then say for every additional slot above your category, you add a -1 to things like movement and combat. And so if I'm carrying 5 additional items, now I'm at 25, I'm moderately encumbered. I am now getting a -5, which is going to reduce my movement. I'm going to, lose 5 steps out of my movement, which, that's a lot. Well, is it? Because you're trying to juggle all this stuff, you're trying to hold on to it, and you're not trying to wear yourself out over distance. If you're running, it's even harder, right? So the same thing with combat. How do you fight with all your stuff? You're holding all this extra stuff, which brings us to some interesting, caveats to this, or companions to this. One of the things I started doing, this was going back to the 90s, was I started having the characters. We issued, I homemade the character sheets to include these slots. And then I would have these little sheets, and I say, okay, this is your sack. I'm carrying a sack that can hold 5 slots worth of stuff. And I've got it slung over my shoulder. I'm just carrying it in my hand, so I know I'm encumbering myself extra. My backpack holds 15, or holds 10 items, has 10 slots. So we have rule in the core book, or it's the player handbook, but there's a rule for allowing you to disencumber yourself. So you can remove your backpack, so you're not it's not being a hindrance in combat. So if you're carrying a heavy backpack that's heavily loaded, you're going to want to set it down before you get into a brawl or something, because you don't want those negatives in combat. So usually it's considered, in modern standards, an action. Whether it's defined as a full action or a partial, that's up to you in your GM. But you're going to set it down. This brings an interesting conundrum. I drop my sack, or I put my pack over here. It's just like if your group is taking a rest, and usually during most rests, what do? You unencumber yourself. You take all the extra stuff off and set it aside, perhaps to access it, to get supplies, whatever. So if you run off and forget that you didn't grab it, I don't know, 2 hours later in a different part of the dungeon, or in another part of the valley, suddenly you're looking for something, and you realize you didn't pick up the pack, or the GM says, I have no notation here of you picking up your pack. And you say, oh, well, no, I did. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but unless you specified that I picked up my pack, and literally picked up that extra piece of paper, and it said, I'm picking up my pack, you can make the argument that you left it behind. Well, a cheat would be just to say, oh, well, okay, this time I'll let you. No, you got to go back for it, or you let it go. So then you have to ask yourself, what's in that pack, and how valuable is it to the continuation of our adventure, of this portion of the campaign? And that brings other interesting scenarios. So sometimes having to go back for something because you forgot to pick it up has additional value, because you can sit there and you go back to a combat zone, and generally speaking, you rarely find those things left alone. What I meant is, if you're gone long enough, let's say you had a run-in with some goblins, you kill most of them, a handful run away. The rest are going to creep back there after the battle's over to ransack their companions and loot anything that they can find of value. Maybe recover the wounded, maybe eat them, I don't know. Then there's other things, plenty of scavengers and wild beasts. So you could find yourself in yet another encounter trying to reclaim your stuff. Then there's that other possibility. I took my pack off, and this tribe of goblins come rushing out of the ground. One of them may just grab your pack and run off. As a GM, I might roll to see if that's a chance, and if it does, then I'll say the nearest goblin grabs your pack, or the nearest goblin grabs his pack or her pack. And if it's in middle combat and you don't do something about that, then your pack just ran off. What do? Do you chase the goblins down? Do you track them down to get your stuff back? How much value is in that pack to you? So we go back to those slots and things like that. Boy, I miss having the truck. Right now, I'd love to have the truck running with the AC going, the fan going. It's humid as all get out. It's a nice day, but it is very humid. Even though I'm sitting in shade for a change, it still can be brutal in this truck. So anyway, what if we talk about consumables? Another one of those things that like to conveniently get rid of. So how do we get rid of encumbrance and things like consumables? We use magic. How many, suddenly everybody in the party has to have a bag of holding. Those things are supposed to be rare. They're not commonplace. You're not be able to walk into any mid-sized town and find a magic store that sells all of this wonderful stuff cheap. I mean, it's just not really how that's supposed to work. So it's supposed to be a rare thing. And so everybody wants a magic, magic sack. Everybody wants a bag of holding. Everybody wants a haversack because you can carry much, much more stuff. And all in my mind is that just adds more slots of stuff. So you still would track how many items and what is and what where. But most people should not have this. Should be not part of the general kit of most adventurers. This is, and sometimes an entire adventure could be revolving around just acquiring one of these things, ideally. Right? So when we look at things like consumables, food, I think of food as what is an average human need for a day's hard work or hard travel. The traditional meal ready to eat, or MRE, that the military, U.S. military uses, and most militaries around the world use today, is an item about yay big, that you can hold in your hand. You can hold, you can grab, so it's an item, it's a single item. So 1 day rations, or 1 day's food supply, takes up a slot. So if I only carry, 20 slots, how many days of food am I carrying? I'm going to carry 10 days of food. That means 50% of my carrying capacity is now devoted at the beginning of the adventure to food. As time goes on and we consume things, you open those slots for other things you find along the way, or when it comes time to replenish. Water would be another thing. How many gallons of water? A water skin holds a gallon of water. If we consider that a slot, how many gallons of water did you carry? How many days of supplies do you have on you? Iron rations are a little different because I've always considered iron rations to be an emergency ration. It says it right in there, and so they're meant to be dense and compact, and they're not. That's not for the flavor. It's for the survival. And so ideally, you might be able to carry 5 to a slot. You can have 5 days worth of iron rations in one hand versus a 1 day of normal rations in one hand. So that has its advantages and disadvantages. So a lot of small items like string and the flint and tenders and arrowheads. Like I said, all these constitute minor items. So we all agree that 5 minor items to a slot, or 25 in the case of things like coins and gemstones. So it just starts to make things a little simpler, because now we only have to look at our sheet and we've consumed 1 day of supply. We just we just erase it from the line, or empty the slot, and now it's open to pick up something and put something in there. And you're not going to break your immersion without having to get the calculator out and do a lot of this. Oh, can I go this far? Can I do that? So then we just look at the bigger character. A larger character is going to be able to carry 25 slots. A smaller character like a halfling, maybe they only can carry 10 or 15. It's all predetermined. And then for every additional slot above that, you take a negative penalty, and it accumulates. So point to it too is, so there's a possibility you carry too much stuff and you can't walk, because that's a reality of the world. That we all do that. You want real immersion, you want total immersion. That's part of immersion. So is supplies. It's like your torches. How often do we forego torches? And I think that's a good topic for a different video. I'm trying to keep these videos a little short. Hopefully this one comes off a little better with some better sound. As I'm still struggling with the laptop situation at home. I am kind of, I don't want to say quite panicked, but I was very, very annoyed last night after 4 hours of trying to figure out how to get a video maker program onto that Apple laptop without being able to access Apple Store via my internet access for some anal reason, because I'm not an Apple person. I have very little experience with Apple. I'm just saying, it's not my thing. It's a beautiful laptop. I just wish I could figure out a better way to make it work for me. I keep working at it. I'm not giving up on it yet, but it sure was frustrating, because I was hoping to use it to do some videos tomorrow, today being Friday, tomorrow or Sunday, and I'm looking more and more like I'm just going to have to use my old laptop, because I've got some items that really need that down view. That's the key problem. The laptop has a video maker on it. It's not very good. It's very generic, like this. This has one. All laptops have them. It's just that it doesn't have any extra options, which means I can't plug in my other camera and do the down shot. Now, my old laptop, I can use the Logitech's program that's on it to do down shots, but then I can't do the face shot because it won't link it to the laptops like the XSplit lets me do. You know, I don't know. I'll figure it out eventually. Anyway, I'm Rick. Welcome to your seat at the table. Guys, like the channel, let your friends know. Don't like the channel, let your friends know. Hit the like button. At least hit the like button, right? Love it if you subscribe, but definitely hit the like button. Every little bit helps. I keep hearing on every video I hear out there from everybody that's professional. Anyway, till next time.